The South African Human Rights Commission has expressed concern about the death of a learner with a disability who died at a Christiana School for the Blind in Northwest on Friday. In August 2015, 3 female learners aged between 16 and 18 had died in a fire that broke out in the learners' hostel. And we now take this matter further. We are joined here in studio by Osmond Mngomezulu. He's the South African Human Rights Commission's acting provincial manager from the Northwest. Good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for coming through.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us.
Let's just get clarity on this one. What actually happened here? Because we understand it's a 6-year-old learner who was visually impaired and wheelchair bound.
Well, the details are a bit sketchy, but what I can confirm is that we did go to the school on Monday, the 28th of January, and we confirmed that indeed a 6-year-old learner with disabilities had died at the school premises on Friday, 25 January. But the Commission has already initiated its investigation. It's at its preliminary stages. But there have been some findings that we've already
Are you able to talk
made.
to us about the findings? Because one would not understand 5 days later, details are still sketchy.
Yes. As to the circumstances surrounding the death of the learner, the Commission requests not to comment at this stage because to observe some sensitivity, because we understand that the learner has not
Do
yet
you suspect any foul play
been buried.
Yeah.
But there are other issues that we can comment on. So the only one that I would like to reserve the comments on is the circumstances around the death, because the Commission is still going to discuss the matter with the parents, and also to enable the family to mourn, as we understand that the learner will be buried on Friday, the 1st of February.
All right.
But there are issues that are already in the public domain that the Commission can
Let's talk about those issues, Babu Mngomezulu, because there have been incidents or tragedies happening in Christiana in the Northwest Province, 2010, 2013, 2015, and now at the Christiana School, or School for the Blind and School for the Deaf. The Commission had previously conducted its investigation on the circumstances, and I think part of what came from your investigations was that children's human rights were violated. What happened after that?
So, indeed, the Commission, that's why when the Commission learned of the death of this learner recently, we took the matter seriously because we could draw from the past work that the Commission had done. As you correctly say, at Christiana School for the Blind alone, there was a death of 4 male learners in the fire, and in 2013 another learner drowned in a swimming pool and passed away, and now the death of this learner. And also in other schools in the Northwest, like the Northwest School for the Deaf in 2015, where female learners aged 16 to 18 had died in the fire, and 23 learners jumped off the windows to escape the fire and were injured and hospitalized. So the Commission had been looking closely at those issues, particularly around special schools in the Northwest, and had issued an investigative report in December 2017, making a number of recommendations to the Department of Education in the province, Northwest Province. It is important to note that the Commission had indeed found that the human rights of the learners had been violated due to the fact that when we conducted our investigation, we discovered that the building, particularly the hostel in that school, was not compliant with building regulations, and there were issues around the learners being locked inside when they were sleeping in the hostel. So when the fire broke out, this is Northwest School for the Deaf, and there was an alarm which the learners could not hear. So there were no visual signals to alert them of the danger, and hence they were trapped in the fire. And so these are issues that appear to be recurring. Last year, the Commission conducted a provincial hearing where it was probing all the schools in the Northwest. A report is yet to be issued by the Commission in respect of that investigation.
But quickly, let's just talk about the recommendations that were put forward by the Commission to the department. Have those issues been addressed?
Not entirely.
So what happens now? I mean, there have always been concerns that the Human Rights Commission is just one of those institutions who do not bite, if one can say.
That is not true. Our recommendations cannot be ignored. It has been confirmed in the number of courts of law that in judgments that decisions of Chapter 9 institutions can't be ignored. If you are aggrieved by such a decision, you'd have to challenge them through a court of law in a process of judicial review. In this, it's important to note in this matter that such recommendations or findings and recommendations had not been challenged through a court of law.
But I'm talking about the implementations thereof. Have they been implemented by the department? So
during the, not entirely as I started earlier, but during our provincial hearing last year, again the department was invited to make submissions, including the steps that have been taken to comply with our recommendations in the Northwest School for the Deaf investigation. And the department stated that the implementation is still underway because particularly we had recommended that an audit has to be conducted of all the schools in the province. Look at the infrastructure, the staffing, the resources, and whether or not the schools are adequately capacitated to provide learning to the learners with disabilities and also to provide a conducive environment and that is safe for all the learners.
All right, time constraints, we have to leave it at this, but surely we'll have you back in studio to talk about your findings post your investigations. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
All right, many thanks there to Osmond Mngomezulu. He's the South African Human Rights Commission's acting provincial manager in the Northwest, of course, talking to us about this tragedy that struck there where a 6-year-old visually impaired and wheelchair-bound learner died at a school. We take